Good morning, everyone. Let's get started. Thank you for joining us. Before we get things going, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge where we are. Today, I am joined by Justin Riemer, myself, CEO, Iftikhar Huq, ERR's Director Impact, as well as Chris Owttrim, Executive Director of Technology and Innovation. I will provide a short overview of ERA and our mandate, and then I will get things going into the funding call where Chris will talk about many of the details of interest today. But before we begin, just a few quick housekeeping items. All participant microphones are muted to avoid background noise. If you run into some technical issues with the webinar, please email Neil at nwedden@eraalberta.ca, and we'll do our best to help. And if you're not able to resolve it or need to leave early, we'll be posting a full recording of the session on our website. That recording will include both the presentation and the live Q&A and is typically available within 48 hours. We'll also share it through our social media channels and newsletter. And speaking of Q&A, you'll see a question mark icon in the top right corner of your screen. Clicking that will open a panel where you can submit your questions at any time during the session. One quick note, please use the Q&A panel rather than the chat or comment section so we don't miss anything. In terms of the agenda today, we have 1 hour together. First, I'm going to give you a bit more about ERA and our mandate. Next, I'll provide an overview of the Industrial Transformation Challenge. I'll cover key points on scope and eligibility of the call, the submission process, and the timelines for the funding decision. Finally, we'll end by answering some of your questions. Again, you'll see that question mark icon in the top navigation. We'll answer as many questions as we can, but if we don't address your question, you're welcome to follow up with us afterwards. So with that, let's begin. Thank you for expressing interest in the Industrial Transformation Challenge. I'd like to share a little bit more about ERA off the top before we get into the details with Chris. Since 2009, ERA has invested the proceeds from the province's industrial carbon price to help strengthen our competitiveness and economic growth. Alberta's industrial carbon price is important because it makes a market signal for innovation. It encourages industry to find smarter, cleaner, and more efficient ways to produce energy and industrial products. It encourages industry in all kinds of ways to improve their competitiveness. And ERA is a key part of making that system work. We take funding sourced from the large emitters from under Alberta's tier regulation, not to mention federal funding streams, including the clean fuel regulations, and invest it directly into technologies and projects to help industry improve their performance. We play a critical role as a source of patient capital. Many of the technologies needed to help Alberta's competitiveness require significant upfront investment and longer lead times than traditional venture capital often supports. Our role is to help de-risk and accelerate these projects so Alberta companies can scale solutions that otherwise may not happen without direct investment support. We've heard this time and time again from those that we've invested. We give them a fighting chance. And more importantly, ERA delivers these outcomes as a highly efficient, low-cost organization. We focus on ensuring as much funding as possible goes towards projects and technology deployment, maximizing impact for industry, the economy, and emission reductions. The result is an organization that punches well above its weight. Ultimately, ERA is about ensuring Alberta remains an industrial and energy powerhouse, helping our industries innovate and compete globally. So as an independent arm's-length organization with strong connections to both industry and government, ERA has a proven track record in managing funds with transparency and rigor. Since 2009, we've committed over $1.1 billion towards 351 projects that are worth in total $11 billion. ERA receives its funding from both the Government of Alberta through the Technology Innovation Emissions Reduction or TIER Fund, as well as funds sourced through the Canadian Fuel Regulation and the federal government. These funds that are sourced from the large emitters are not taxpayers who require to reduce their greenhouse emissions under provincial regulations. For every dollar that ERA invests, we are attracting more than $5 from other investors. That means more capital mobilized per dollar. That's roughly 8 to 10% more total impact per ERA dollar. And that demonstrates strong return on our investment and makes our funding highly efficient. It also signals confidence in the projects and reinforces credibility. What's also significantly important is that projects support jobs and investment all around the province, from Fort McMurray to Fort Saskatchewan, Grand Prairie to Grand Cache, Edson to Exshaw, and so many places in between. In fact, by 2027, our projects are expected to generate over 51,000 person years of employment in Alberta and contribute $8.2 billion to the province's GDP. The benefits extend nationwide too, with nearly 70,000 person years of employment and $11 billion in GDP projected for Canada overall. It's important to note these projects create economic value at every stage, from supporting skilled trades and construction workers during peak buildouts to sustaining long-term operational and maintenance jobs that anchor communities and industrial competitiveness for decades. This is a direct result of ERA's investment. It's important also to note that this kind of investment and job creation happens across all key industrial sectors. This ensures Alberta continues to build and maintain expertise in energy, manufacturing, agriculture, transportation, and heavy industry. You'll see here that our investments largely align with the largest sources of emissions in Alberta, like the oil sands, electricity, and transportation. Aligning investment with Alberta's largest sources of emissions helps ensure that our reductions are achieved at meaningful scale, supporting the sectors that contribute most significantly to jobs, exports, investments, and economic activity in the province. The other thing I'd like to draw your attention to is that these jobs and investment and economic activity happen all across the province. Because Alberta's largest industrial operators operate province-wide, the benefits are also province-wide. In the industrial heartland near Edmonton, that can mean investments in hydrogen, carbon capture, petrochemicals, and industrial decarbonization. In Calgary and southern Alberta, it means clean tech companies, engineering expertise, low carbon fuels, and agriculture innovation. In Northeast Alberta and the oil sands region around Fort McMurray, it helps drive methane reduction, solvent technologies, efficiency improvements, and carbon management projects. In central and rural Alberta, it can support bioenergy, geothermal, emissions reduction in manufacturing and agriculture, and opportunities for local trades and suppliers. It's amazing when we do this together like this. Now I'm going to hand it over to Chris to take a closer look at this opportunity.
Thanks very much, Justin. We're excited to be here once again to talk about the Industrial Transformation Challenge, which has become ERA's core annual funding competition. It's a program under which we continue to see strong demand across sectors and across technology areas, and I'm really excited to share the details of the program with you today. Since we did the first Industrial Transformation Challenge, ERA has committed over $175 million to projects worth more than $980 million across the 3 iterations of the program to date. If successful, those funded projects funded under this competitive program are estimated to deliver annual average greenhouse gas reductions of 630,000 tons of CO2 equivalent and over 12 million tons cumulatively by 2050. This is real impact for Alberta's carbon competitiveness. As Justin alluded to, the economic picture is equally, if not more, important on these projects. The projects from industrial transformation alone are estimated to create over 6,200 person years of employment in the near term. And that can include everything from peak construction employment to ongoing operational jobs. These are jobs that are highly skilled, well-paying, and contribute to the overall health of our economy. The projects funded are also expected to contribute over $1 billion to Alberta's GDP by 2027. As I said, we've had 3 iterations of the Industrial Transformation Challenge to date, and last year was our most oversubscribed challenge yet. We saw peak interest in the program with a record number of applicants and funding requested. We really look forward to seeing what comes out of the program this year in our 4th iteration, and I'm really excited to help you all through the process. So let's talk about details. First of all, the funding available. This year's Industrial Transformation Challenge has been capitalized at $50 million in potential funding. Individual projects can request up to $10 million per project with a minimum funding request of $500,000. As Justin mentioned, the leverage on these investments is absolutely critical. And so, as usual, all funding must be matched at least 1-to-1 by private sector contributions. This is to ensure projects have skin in the game and can demonstrate market pull. And that is what helps us stretch our funding even farther and deliver the type of benefits and outcomes that we're looking for. As Justin said, a single dollar from ERA has historically created at least 6 times the spending power. This is particularly compelling in today's budget and carbon-constrained environments. Who can apply and who's eligible for funding? This is a common question we get, and particularly for industrial transformation, I want to stress that ERA is built on the idea that strong solutions can come from anywhere. As such, under this program, we accept applications from a wide range of organizations, basically any organization type you can think of, but that might include technology developers, industrial operators or owners, municipalities, indigenous communities, small and medium-sized enterprises, research organizations and universities, and others. It's really important to note that applicants do not need to be based in Alberta. What matters is that the project itself is demonstrated or deployed in Alberta, or that you can draw a very strong line of sight to benefit to the province in the future. I'll also make a note here around partnerships. So we do look for a single lead applicant on projects, but we strongly encourage you to come as part of a consortium. So you may have a single lead, but you may want to bring in developers, technology vendors, consultants, industry participants, and anybody else who might strengthen your proposal. The most successful projects in ERA's history, I can tell you, have usually been in the form of one of those consortia. We also really encourage all applicants to try to seek out and build those partnerships with enabling organizations and potential supporters in the environment. That could include research organizations, indigenous communities, municipalities, regulators, and others. And again, those can be the types of elements that set your project apart from the others that we receive. In addition, strong partnerships are often critical to demonstrating project readiness, reducing risk, strengthening the execution of projects, and increasing the overall impact and outcomes, which of course is what we're all about. Moving on to the specifics on the call scope, this is something we get questions about every year. And so what do we mean by industrial transformation? So on the industrial side, what we mean is that this call is focused on solutions relevant to Alberta's energy intensive and trade exposed sectors. That could include heavy manufacturing and sort of what people traditionally think of as industrial. It also applies to oil and gas and other natural resource extraction, manufacturing sectors, electricity, both on the generation side and on the grid side, but it also includes other natural resource sectors that might not commonly be thought of as industrial. So forestry, agriculture, nature-based solutions, water treatment, soil remediation, these are all absolutely in scope. So don't limit yourself just when you see the term industrial there. We are thinking very broad with the challenge. And the last thing we want is for any applicant to inadvertently screen yourself out from the program. On the technology side, this call is deliberately open. So when we talk about transformation, we're looking for novel solutions. Maybe they're novel to Alberta, maybe they're novel to a particular industry, or maybe they're first of kind in the world. It's quite a broad range of innovation. But ultimately, what we're looking for is solutions that have the potential to transform or fundamentally reshape the sector to which they're applied. And what we mean by that is we're looking for solutions that really radically change the environmental performance, the economic competitiveness, the product lines, the market access, the energy competitiveness, and the cost profile of the sectors that they're applied to. So if your project clearly delivers on those outcomes, it's likely a fit. Another very common question we get is the types of technologies that are eligible or that will fund. I want to stress, and this is repeated a couple times in the guidelines, that this is not a technology prescriptive program. What that means is even though we provide a list here on the slide, we provide a list in the guidelines and on the website, you don't have to be on that list in order to receive funding. Again, you need to make the case for how your technology contributes to the outcomes that are targeted by the program. However, it's always helpful to have illustrated examples. And so what I'll do is I'll provide a brief list here. The best thing you can do, though, recognizing this is an annual program, is look back at the past 3 years of funding announcements under industrial transformation. You're going to see, if you go to those lists of projects, that there's a very broad range of opportunities and technologies funded there, including the most recent tranche of projects that we just recently announced. All of those projects that have been funded previously under industrial transformation can perhaps help you understand where your project might fit and how it might align with this call. But just to get into the list of things we're particularly focusing on this year, you'll see them listed on this slide. So beginning at the top, digital solutions are of growing prominence, I think it's fair to say. That could include things like application of AI and artificial intelligence, machine learning into industry to help optimize operations, use digital twins to improve performance and enhance predictive maintenance to avoid shutdowns. Power grid innovation, again, very important topic these days, as we know the grid is the backbone of increased industrial performance in the province. We're looking for grid modernization technologies, grid enhancing technologies, long duration storage, enhancements to our transmission and distribution system, and of course, upgrades or new generation on the system. Industrial energy systems is a broad area, but it's really all about how energy is produced and used within industrial sectors in the province. So if you think about behind the fence, clean power and heat for industry, integration of energy storage, heat optimization and recovery, all of these things that are sort of bread and butter upgrades for industrial facilities to help them improve their competitiveness. Advanced materials and circular economy solutions. This is a great area and one that has a lot of potential in terms of developing new products for Alberta's industries. So if you think about solutions like waste to value conversion, critical minerals, which are of course important, and advanced materials coming from Alberta's existing natural resources such as bitumen. As I mentioned, agriculture and agri-food solutions are a important component of this call, and they are something that we're always looking for innovation in. So if you're looking for new harvesting and cultivation technologies, improved fertilizer formulations, and in particular solutions for water and soil in the agricultural context are things we're particularly excited about. Forestry and forest products continue to be an important industry in the province, and we think there's a lot of potential around where that sector can go in terms of new products, whether that's bioenergy, biomaterials, upgrading facilities so they can participate in the power grid to a greater extent, and similar. I've mentioned land, air, and water solutions a couple times. This is a common theme throughout all the technology areas, but we know sometimes there are direct investments in these areas. That could be remediation, water treatment, nature-based approaches, and everything in between. Last but certainly not least, and probably what comes to mind first when you think about industrial transformation, is process innovation. So when we think about Alberta's significant base of existing industries, we have everything from petrochemicals to fertilizer, to refining, to cement and concrete, to forestry. We know that these facilities need upgrades. We know that they can do more and can be upgraded to improve their competitiveness. And there's a ton of processes and chemistries and catalysts and all kinds of fun engineering things within those facilities that have the opportunity for upgrades. We're also very excited about industrial electrification and low emissions feedstocks to really help, again, industrial facilities get to that next level of performance. Again, remember, these are examples only. So if I haven't listed your technology in that brief list, don't fret. What we really want to see are the outcomes targeted for the challenge, the potential for impact, and the ability to scale. What I will say is that our funding is not intended for business as usual activities. So we're not looking here to just buy down the cost of a technology or address a financial risk. We are looking to share risk on the technical or commercial side. And so if your project is in that category, you're looking to get it over the hump of a first pilot, a first demonstration, or even a first of kind, which I'll talk about on an upcoming slide. That's really where we want to hear from you. So again, not a prescriptive list. If you don't see yourself here, please reach out to our applications team, and we're happy to have a conversation about the specifics of your technology and your project to help you understand how it might fit. I've mentioned it a couple of times, but novelty and technology advancement are key objectives of the call. You'll hear us throw around novelty and innovation language quite a bit. Again, we've heard in the past that this leads to some applicants inadvertently screening yourself out. So again, at a high level, what we're looking for is projects that advance a particular technology and reduce its technical risk so that it can become more economically competitive and more bankable in the future. So it's not intended for business as usual solutions or to fill a financial gap, as I said. But on the flip side, we're not looking for necessarily truly first of kind globally technologies. So if there's a technology that's been demonstrated elsewhere in the world, elsewhere in Canada, maybe even elsewhere in Alberta, but in a different sector or a different application, your technology could still be eligible for the call and could still apply. What we're looking for is for you to make the case around why ERA funding is needed to help de-risk your technology in the particular application you're targeting, how it goes beyond what we could expect in a reasonable baseline future scenario, and where the strategic value of an investment in your technology at this point in time could be. In short, we're looking for projects where ERA funding makes a meaningful difference in advancing the technology, not just helping something that would happen anyway. I said we're not prescriptive on the technology side, but we do have some guardrails on what can apply and what is out of scope. So you'll see that listed here. This is particularly important to be aware of because you don't want to go through the whole process and then be told that your technology doesn't fit. So there's a few things here and technologies and project types that are out of scope. The first one, and is something that comes up often, is that under this year's industrial transformation, we are not looking to fund standalone pre-construction work. So if you're thinking about an open-ended research program, early R&D on your project, emissions abatement strategies and roadmaps, feed studies and feasibility studies, so the front-end engineering work needed to get to a project, those are not eligible unless they're part of a bigger project. So typically what we're looking to do here is deploy capital, get operating equipment in the field and see how it works. Obviously, there needs to be some front-end engineering work to get to that point, and you're more than welcome to include that in a project. What you can't do is apply just for the study and say, we'll do the real project later without ERA support. That's not what we're looking to fund here. Another important one is digital solutions that don't have a direct line of sight to emissions reductions or environmental benefits at a specific industrial site. So in the past, we've had a few applications around, well, we're going to develop an algorithm, we're going to create a digital twin for a hypothetical facility, things like that. And again, if there's not a direct connection to an industrial site or an emissions reduction, it might just be a little bit too abstract for us to fund. The third thing is deployment of sort of run-of-the-mill energy efficiency technologies. This is an important one because ERA has plenty of incentive programs for these types of technologies. So if you think about variable frequency drives for motor upgrades in industrial facilities, pneumatic, low bleed conversion in the oil and gas sector, these are all technologies that are very well supported in other programming and don't quite meet the bar or the test for novelty and technical risk in this particular program. Last but not least is the development of GHG protocols. We get a lot of requests for that. We know that that's an important area to help commercialize technologies, and I'll just say that's not something that this program will fund, but we're always happy to have a conversation about what your needs might be, and perhaps it can get funding in a different path. Moving on to the stage of development, I alluded to this earlier, but we always get questions around what exactly we're funding and what the projects should look like. Again, if you look back at the past 3 programs that we've announced projects for under industrial transformation, take a look at the scope of those projects, the scale, what they're working on, and that might give you an idea. Just to put it in words, though, we are looking for everything between technology readiness level of approximately 6 at the end of the project, all the way up to technology readiness level 9 or higher. To define that a little bit, at lower TRL, we're looking for field tests and pilots. So essentially where a technology has been prototyped and proven, and it's ready for that first testing in a real operational environment. In the middle of the range, we're talking about commercial demonstrations, and that's really where you're going into a real commercial site with a representative scale deployment and testing it out in the way that you expect it to be operated in its commercial form. And then at the high end of the TRL spectrum, it's truly first of kind commercial deployment. And so this is full scale, full commercial representation of the technology and expected to operate for the actual economic life of the technology. Again, you might find that your technology or your project falls somewhere in between these categories or doesn't quite hit on the specifics of what we've described. Again, it's really important to just come talk to us and we can help you understand if you might fit or not. Project structure, term, and initiation. So mentioned it a couple of times, but as usual, ERA only funds projects with clear objectives, milestones, timelines, deliverables, and a budget, with an objective of advancing a technology towards commercialization. And so what that means, to put it another way, is we don't fund ongoing operations or open-ended research programs. We don't invest in companies or in technologies. We really invest specifically in projects done by those companies to support those technologies. So just to put a finer point on it. The projects funded under this year's Industrial Transformation Challenge have an expected duration of approximately 3 years. We do encourage and allow applicants to add on about a year of operational time onto that. So your total duration could be about 4 years in theory. But the important thing here is we want to see these dollars deployed quickly. So we want projects that are ready to initiate should ERA approve funding, have low risk of commencement and getting underway with project activities, and ultimately have low risk of execution once you're into the project. To that end, we are putting a requirement for projects to start within 120 days of funding approval. We do offer the potential for delayed starts. We know sometimes budget cycles are missed or turnarounds are delayed, things like that. So again, there is flexibility. But if you present us to a project that's from day one not likely to start in the near term, then what we're going to do is we're going to tell you to apply to next year's industrial transformation. Again, this is an annual challenge. There's no need to put in something that's not ready if another year would suffice. Lastly, projects must deliver value to Alberta, and I've touched on this a couple of times. Typically, what that means is it's a soft requirement that your project happens in the province. In a very limited number of situations, we may allow projects that happen outside of Alberta, or there's always early stage work or manufacturing or things that could happen outside the province, provided the end result and the benefits are realized here in Alberta. So again, if you're kind of in the gray area on that, come talk to our team. So now I'll walk you through the application and evaluation process. And this will be familiar to anyone that's applied to industrial transformation in the past, or indeed many of ERA's funding programs. For this year's program, we're using a two-stage adjudication and project selection process, followed of course by project execution. The first stage where we're at right now in the process is what we call the expression of interest stage. So we've launched the competition and we're currently accepting expression of interest submissions all the way until the deadline in June. After that deadline, which we will not extend, just to be clear, we will submit all of those proposals to our expert review team for an evaluation based on the published criteria. This will culminate with a shortlist decision and a communication of the outcome to all applicants. So if you are shortlisted, you'll be invited to the next stage. If not, you'll be informed and you'll be offered the chance to get some feedback from our team. At the full project proposal stage, or FPP stage, for shortlisted applicants, this is really the more detailed stage of due diligence where you'll be providing much more information to us about the project, expected outcomes, the implementation plan, financing plan, and other information. We assign all projects at the full project proposal stage an advisor who will be your main point of contact with ERA and can help you with walking through the specifics of that process. And again, there's a bit of time there to prepare your full proposal. In parallel, our greenhouse gas team and our financial risk assessment team will be working with you to assess and do their diligence on your project. The full project proposal stage culminates with essentially a pitch presentation from shortlisted applicants to our expert review panel, followed by a live Q&A to ensure that we get answers to all the questions we need in order to formulate a final decision on projects. Ultimately, it is the expert review panel that formulates a recommendation on whether or not to fund your project, and that goes to ERA's board of directors. And so I should be clear that all funding decisions under this competition are made by ERA's independent board of directors at their sole discretion. Again, following that phase, all applicants will be notified whether they're approved for funding or not, and those that are approved for funding will move on to project execution. I have a few words on that later, so I won't spend too much time on that phase, but it's what you might imagine. We'll enter into a contribution agreement with all successful applicants, and then we'll move right on to project delivery, reporting, and final outcomes and sharing of results. I will stress that the key tenets of our process are rigor, transparency, and fairness. And to that extent, I can assure you that all proposal materials that are made will be kept strictly confidential, and our entire process is overseen by an independent fairness monitor who reports directly to our board, who ensures that the process is conducted in a fair, impartial manner that's free from conflict or unintentional bias. So the key timelines and dates for the program are here on the slide. You can see that the big deadline coming up that you need to be aware of is the submission deadline for the expressions of interest. That is June 17th of this year. So just a little over a month away. And as per usual, we will not be extending that deadline or offering flexibility for extenuating circumstances. What that means, and I'll mention this again at the end of the deck, is please start your proposal now and don't wait to get it in. In fact, the earlier you submit it, the better, because there could always be technical challenges. Maybe your computer needs to restart, maybe your internet's down on the last day. And again, unfortunately, we are typically not able to offer accommodation if those challenges happen on your side. Again, once the submission deadline has passed, we will begin the review process. We will notify all applicants, whether you're shortlisted or not, by the end of July, and you'll be from there working on your full project proposal if you're shortlisted. Those full project proposals will be due in September. Presentations will take place in very late October or early November, timeline to be confirmed, and final funding decisions will be made in December of this year. So all applicants will have a decision on their funding by the end of the calendar year. Few tips before we move on to questions around preparing a strong submission. We get tons of questions every year on what does a good project look like, how can I put my best foot forward, and things of that nature. So I will stress that this is a competitive process, and typically, and especially under industrial transformation, we receive far more requests for funding than we can support. I can tell you last year we had more than 10 times the amount of funding requested than we were able to allocate, and we anticipate much the same this year. So it's important to make a clear and compelling case for why your project should be funded and what sets it apart. First of all, and I just said this, but start now. There's really no reason why you can't go online today, review the guidelines, review the template, start preparing your submission, pulling together information, pulling together partnerships. We know it doesn't take more than a month to write a 10-page proposal, but the more details you can pull in, the more partnerships you can secure, the more financing you can secure, things of that nature, the better positioned your project will be to succeed. Again, you don't need those things finalized by the expression of interest deadline, so please don't inadvertently exclude yourself. If you're saying, oh no, my financing raise is concluding in July, how can I submit a proposal in June? That's okay. Just give us the line of sight, make it very clear when that money is coming in so that we can do our diligence and assess the risk profile of that, as an example. The next point, and this is, sounds simple, but is really important, is make sure you're registered on the grant manager application portal. We often, in the last week before submissions, get panicked emails from applicants saying, my account's been locked out. I thought I had an account, but I lost the password. My browser's not logging in, all of these things. And if you're really waiting until that point to submit, then you're very much behind and at risk of not being able to submit. So again, takes you 5 minutes today to click on the link, make sure your credentials still work for the portal, or if you haven't created an account before, to create your account and get registered. And that way you can be set up to begin filling out all the information, populating the forms, validating the submission, and submitting it on time. Again, another point that might sound basic, but you'd be surprised how many questions we get that are very clearly stated in the guidelines. So please give those guidelines a close read. The team has spent a lot of time working on those guidelines to make them as clear as possible and to include frequently asked questions, both in the guidelines itself and in the helpfully titled frequently asked questions document that we've published. So please give those a close read. 90%, I'd say, of the questions we get can be answered by those guidelines. They are not that long, although they're getting longer as we try to pack in more information. And again, it's really worth your time to go through them. I would, if I was an applicant, where I would really focus my time is on the evaluation criteria and the prompts that are in the template. So if you compare the criteria to the prompts, you'll notice we've asked you a very specific set of questions to ensure that our reviewers have the same information for all projects and are really able to assess how you perform relative to the criteria. You'll note that those criteria have different weightings, and so while they're all important and they all contribute to whether your project moves forward or not, you will want to spend more time and ensure you're really putting forward your best foot forward on the highest weighted criteria. Strong applications that we've seen in the past tend to do a few things really well. They clearly define the technology and how it compares to alternatives without resorting to marketing speak or unsubstantiated claims. They demonstrate a realistic and achievable implementation plan, so clearly articulating what ERA money will be used for, how it will advance the technology, and what the risk mitigation profile is for the project. They quantify and demonstrate strong environmental and economic benefits. Really, it's all about the and here, and convincing us that there's a high degree of certainty that those benefits will be realized. And they show a credible path to commercialization. So this competition is not just about, in large part, one-off projects, although those have been funded from time to time. Generally, the best path to success is to demonstrate that an ERA investment in this first iteration of your technology will lead to that substantial follow-on deployment in the province. That's really where the bang for buck is. At the end of the day, the strongest proposals are those that illustrate the potential to solve a real problem for industry and with technical merit in order to achieve real-world deployment and impact. Again, can't stress enough how valuable it is to go back to the prior list of projects. Now, if your project is exactly the same as one of those prior projects, we may not fund it for obvious reasons, but you can at least get an idea of the types of things we funded and how they've aligned with the program. Last slide before we get into question and answers. So a few practical tips as you're actually writing your expression of interest. Keep it clear and focused. Please do follow the template. We often have a few applicants each year that will disregard the template and submit things in different formats. We don't necessarily disqualify you for that, but it makes your proposal hard to read. It makes it hard to compare to other proposals. And I can tell you the success rate for folks that deviate from the template is not high. So don't take the risk, just follow the template and everyone will be happier for it. Our reviewers are technical and business experts, but if you've written your proposal in a way that's hard to understand or confusing or misleading, it is difficult to see it succeeding in the process. So please keep that in mind. Stay within the page limit and avoid unnecessary detail. I can tell you we've had good projects where they've left it until page 11 or 12 out of 10 to include some really important and salient points. We automatically truncate those pages out of the document, and then the feedback the applicant gets is, well, the reviewers didn't have enough information on your business plan, so you weren't shortlisted. The applicant goes, well, I've submitted my business plan, it's on page 12. The reviewers didn't see page 12 because the limit is 10. So please keep that in mind. Again, if you follow the template and the weightings, you'll make sure that all that information is where the reviewers need to find it. If you have partnerships that are contributing to your project, so technical, financial, site hosts, industry validators, regulators, it's really important to get letters of support. I can't tell you how important it is to have that validation in writing from partners that they are committed to the project or at least interested in what you're doing. Again, that really helps demonstrate skin in the game. So it might seem simple to get a letter of support or something that's an afterthought. It really can make the difference between a strong proposal, a good proposal, and a great proposal. Let me put it that way. I already mentioned, don't wait until the last day to submit. We are firm on the deadlines. Things can go wrong. We do offer a huge amount of technical support right up until the deadline, and we work with you if there are issues, but we can't guarantee that everybody will get access or support before the program closes. And again, we're pretty inflexible on submissions that happen after the deadline. So if you're on the last day, and again, your proposal won't upload or something, get in touch with us before the deadline, and that's how we can ensure that you're given a fair shot to compete. If you submit, an email to us with your PDF attached 2 days after the deadline, I can tell you our fairness monitor will not accept your proposal. Last but not least, again, when it comes to content, we are looking for technology merit. We're looking for a strong value proposition. So the economics of both your project and your technology once it commercializes, that's really critical. We don't want to see projects funded that don't have any hope of ever being commercialized because the costs are too high or the economics don't work. So please make that case very clear. Please identify clearly your site, your location where all project activities will happen. Again, projects happen in a bunch of different locations. We get that. Make it clear where those are and what the certainty is, and clearly identify your project partners. Sort of name dropping or saying a large industrial player to be confirmed, it does not reflect particularly well, I'll say, from past experience. So to the extent that you can share those partnerships, again, recognizing this is a completely confidential process, we really encourage you to do so. Last but not least, I said it a couple times, but it merits repeating, emphasize the broad benefits potential. So show us how your technology can be deployed multiple times or places across Alberta, how it scales, and how it can be exported. We love to hear the export story and how Alberta-based technologies can help the world achieve its energy and economic objectives. So don't forget to put that in your proposal if you have space. With that, the most important tip I can give you is to contact our team if you have any questions or issues with the process. We have a great internal team here that are very familiar. They've literally seen thousands of these proposals come through. So if you have a question, I assure you they can answer it, and I assure you they will give you great advice on how to put the best foot forward for your proposal. With that, we'll move into the facilitated question and answer period. Please, again, take a look at that question mark in your upper right-hand corner of your screen if you would like to submit a question. Iftikhar is here from our intake team to triage the questions, and he'll be reading them out to me, and I'll be doing my best to answer them. So with that, we'll get into it.
Thank you for the overview, Justin, and the details, Chris. Moving on to the Q&A. I'll triage most of the Q&As, and Chris and I will take turns addressing the questions. The first one, perhaps, to you, Chris, just to reinforce the requirements around the EOI, letters of support, financing in place. Does that all have to be in place prior to the EOI being submitted?
Yeah, really good question. So the short answer is no, you don't have to have all your financing confirmed or your partners confirmed with letters of support in order to submit an EOI. In fact, we have had successful applicants in the past that submit an EOI with a lot of those elements still in progress or unconfirmed. The key piece of advice I can give there is show us the line of sight. So if you still need to raise an additional $3 million to match ERA's contribution, show us your plan for securing that money. If you leave it and say, we're going to go out and ask for this on the street, then you probably won't be successful. But if you say, hey, we're working with financial institution ABC and industrial partner XYZ, and both of those conversations are scheduled to conclude in August of this year, and that's when we expect to have an answer on the financing, that's a much more clear story for the reviewers to assess and to say, okay, we can at least put a risk rating on that. So the line of sight, or at least showing us that you have a plan, is really important. But you don't need to have everything buttoned down at EOI. We know that's only a month away.
Thank you for that, Chris. Maybe building on that, there's a couple of questions around whether ERA will support forming partnerships within the province to develop proposals. And maybe I can take that on and just go through a little bit of the background on that. We highly encourage you to reach out to various technology development partnerships that you have in the province. There are some very strong proponents out there. We encourage you to reach out to them and form consortiums, as Chris was saying earlier on. Those are highly encouraged. We don't have a list that we provide, But one of the things that's important from a tier funding perspective is being able to bring value to the province. And so being able to tie in some of this technical expertise, some of the infrastructure in the province to your proposal is beneficial. Looking at the list, there's a couple of questions around the proponent IP and what the ownership of that IP and where that remains. Do you want to take that, Chris?
Absolutely. This is a very important question as ERA is in the business of supporting commercialization, helping technologies get into the market. So it is in our interest to ensure that your IP remains protected and that you're able to execute on it to deliver the outcomes from your technology. With that said, we have a very strong contribution agreement on all funded projects. The IP remains with the IP holder, so ERA is not taking an ownership position in your IP under normal circumstances. Should there be, misuse of funds or any situation, unfortunate situation that frankly has almost never happened, we do have provisions around licenses and things that we have access to. But again, in a normal situation, all of the IP remains with the original owner, and it's in our interest to see you carry that forward and not compromise your confidentiality. So that's the other piece of this, is that around final reporting, project outcomes, we do look for public reporting and sharing of the lessons learned from projects. None of the things that we require you to report on are ever the type of thing that would compromise your commercial sensitivity. So, people get worried when they see public reporting requirements. Again, you can go on our website and see what prior projects have reported on and what their final reports look like, and that will hopefully give you some confidence in, being able to present your technology, knowing that we're in this together and we're looking to collaborate with you as opposed to being a barrier to commercialization.
Thank you for that, Chris. There's a couple of questions around stacking funding with other federal organizations, other provincial funding organizations, and maybe I can address that. So one of the checkboxes that you'll see as you submit your application is whether we are allowed or whether you give us permission as the applicant to share your application with other funding organizations. ERA has a list of trusted partners. So these are other funding organizations that we have an understanding with to share applications. So if you'd like your application to be shared with other partners, please do check that box, and we'll be able, that gives us the permission to share your application with others, again, under confidentiality. So that's just something that we coordinate across our funding partnerships through the Trusted Partner Program.
Was there a component of that question on stacking?
Yeah, do you want to?
Sure.
Chris? Yeah.
So the question around stacking comes up a lot, and we are, again, looking to leverage our funds to the greatest extent possible, but we do require private match. And so there's a couple of really good examples in our guidelines and in our eligible cost guide around how that stacking can work. In principle, ERA does not actually have a stacking limit. So there could be a relatively high ratio of government funding on a project, provided there's enough private match for the ERA contribution. A really good example is you could have, let's say, a $10 million project, and $3 million of that budget is coming from the federal government, whether that's Natural Resources Canada, ISED, NRC, IRAP, any of those alphabet agencies. $3 million from the feds. You could have $3 million. You could have $3 million requested from ERA, and then $4 million in private. And so your stacking ratio is actually 70% of that project is government funded, which is a bit higher than some other programs allow. We don't have any concern with that because your $4 million is matching our $3 million, so we're actually above a 1-to-1 on that particular example. So there's no concern. Again, financing plans we know can be very different project by project. We've seen projects come in with a dozen different funders, and we have to sort of sort through and understand how that matching works. So always the type of thing that our team's happy to have a conversation about if that's the big concern you have with your proposal.
Thank you for that, Chris. There are several questions around the process and where to download templates and get additional information. We will guide you to our Industrial Transformation Challenge 2026 website, where you'll be able to see both all the documents around the guidelines themselves, the template for submission, the eligible cost criteria, as well as the various legal stipulations that we have to abide by in terms of confidentiality of your information, which we are confidential bound to, as well as some of the limitations through government statute. So we'll send you the link to the Industrial Transformation website, and there will be documents that you can download. There's also a link to applications@era.ca, where you'll be able to reach out to us and get additional information if you need to beyond the webinar itself. So, so looking at some of the additional questions coming through, there's a question around if there's a consortium which is being, which is something that shows strength of the proposal itself, who would become the lead applicant on those? So there's questions of the operator themselves, the technology developer, whether it's a test facility that's running this. Do you want to take that on, Chris?
Yeah, this is a great question, and it goes back to the point around consortia being a really effective model for providing a strong project, but trying to work within our expectation of a single lead applicant. I will say we don't have a particularly strong preference for who that lead applicant is. We've had very successful projects where the industrial operator is the lead applicant. There can be a lot of value in that because they have control over the site. They're the ones demonstrating market pull and skin in the game for the technology. And then, your technology vendor and other participants are essentially contractors or funded entities under the project. But by the same token, we have seen successful projects where the technology developer is the lead and the industrial site, so the customer is essentially there in a customer role in the consortium and is not the lead. Both of those models can work quite well. And then Iftikhar alluded to a couple other scenarios, if you have research institutions, if you have municipalities or communities involved. Again, if you take a look at our portfolio projects, there's examples of all of those there. A little bit less common, and again, it takes a bit of work to make those, work in the same way as the others and sort of demonstrate lower risk, but they can work. So I would say whatever entity is best positioned to write the expression of interest and answer the questions, that's who I would encourage you to put forward the proposal. If we get all the way through and we approve funding for your project, and then you say, actually, we think it's better if we switch the lead applicant to our industrial host for whatever reason, that's something we can be flexible on and work with you. Provided everyone in the consortium agrees, of course. So again, you won't be held to whoever put in the first application needs to be the lead applicant. Sometimes it's a consultant submitting an application on behalf of the applicant. And again, that's okay. If you are a consultant listening to me right now, please put the actual company that you're working for as the applicant organization, not your consultancy. But apart from that, there's no issue.
Thanks for that, Chris. There's a series of questions around what benefits are we looking for in the eligibility criteria and scoring beyond just GHG reductions. So on the broader environmental impacts, the economic benefits. Do you want to take that on, Chris?
Yeah, this is a really important area and something that we've been leaning into increasingly in past years. I will say we've always been very focused at ERA on the and, so the emissions reductions and economic benefits and other environmental benefits. But that nowadays in our current environment is more important than ever. So if you have a project and the primary outcome or the primary benefit is in the water space and maybe the GHG benefits are secondary, please submit that and we're happy to assess. We have a whole process around that and how we can assess the water benefits of your project. It's really important to capture all those benefits in a proposal. So I will tell you, we've seen proposals where the environmental benefit section is left to the very end and the applicant submits 2 sentences and the reviewers say, wow, we actually think there's a really good air quality story here or soil remediation story here, but they haven't addressed it because they've not left themselves enough space, and that results in the proposal getting a lower score than it otherwise would. So again, it's in your interest to really make the case on all of the outcomes of your technology. Again, emissions reductions, other environmental benefits, air, land, water, as well as the sort of socioeconomic economic benefit, the competitiveness benefits, so jobs, revenues, cost reductions, market access, any of those things that come from the technology, we really want to hear about it. We really need to hear about it in order to make a decision on your project. So don't sell yourself short and only focus on the emissions reductions. As again, it's about the totality of benefits from your project.
Thank you for that, Chris. There's a couple of questions around technologies that are either the earlier TRL levels, perhaps a slightly longer time frame than the 3 years, probably a technology that was not listed in the list. I think I'd like to reiterate that what Chris said, which is we are not technology prescriptive, we're technology agnostic, we're opportunity focused. And so, what benefit do we bring to the province? Do we bring to your project as a whole? And so if you have any questions around the TRL levels or other technologies or just deployment opportunities, do reach out to us. We'll have the link on the next slide, and we're happy to provide you some guidance on those elements. Some questions around if the project has to be, what level of de-risking does the project have to get to before it's eligible for ERA funding through this industrial transformation challenge? Do you want to take that on, Chris?
Absolutely. So again, we're in the business with this competition of de-risking your technology from a technology level. So you certainly don't need to have a fully commercial, fully bankable solution with no technical risk. In fact, that's probably ineligible. So we do want you to show that there is some necessary advancement of the technology between where you're at now and full commercialization. So that could be a matter of scale, it could be a matter of integration, it could be a matter of showing that this works within industrial operations and can be, integrated with those. It could be any number of those pieces. Sometimes there's fundamental technology, challenges that need to be resolved. That is really our core business. So you're more than welcome to submit proposals that focus on that. And, again, your project should be helping to address those challenges or those questions. And you should be making the case that, okay, if ERA invests in this, by the end of 3 or 4 years, at the end of the project, we're going to have answered these 3 questions and the technology will be advanced by a commensurate amount. To the point around other elements of de-risking, we do want you to show us that the project itself is low risk. So what that means is that your execution plan is strong, your partnerships, again, are sort of locked in and ready to go. You have a high likelihood of having a site host and a customer. You have, confidence in your vendors, you have confidence in your financing plan. Those are all things that we want to not take as much risk on, right? And I can tell you the biggest source of attrition in our portfolio is that we approve funding and then the other financing doesn't come through. And in that event, we ultimately have had to withdraw funding from a number of really exciting projects because they couldn't find the other financing. So that is something we'll be looking at closely in your submission. And it's in your best interest to convince us that should ERA say yes, the other funders are also ready to say yes and bring their dollars to the table.
That's great. Thanks, Chris. And maybe just building up on that, there's quite a few questions around digital solutions. So I'll just refer back to the comment that Chris had made around the host site and having a host site where you're able to go and deploy the technologies and hence actually demonstrate GHG benefits or other economic and environmental benefits. On the digital solution space, we often see many opportunities coming in that maybe don't have a host site yet. So it's important if you have a digital solution to also have a host site where the digital solution will be deployed. Because ultimately what we'd like to get to is a point where there is in fact emissions reductions happening, commercial benefits happening, economic benefits happening as well. So a digital solution by itself, standalone without a host site is a bit of a challenging proposition. Now that doesn't mean that the host site, to Chris's earlier point, that the host site has to be in place at the time of submission, but there has to be a clear line of sight as to how the digital solution will be deployed at a specific host site, and that there's some pathway to getting to that host site secured for the project itself. I think that also addresses many of the questions that are coming through around for a commercial solution. Do you need to have all of those things in place before the EOI? I think to reiterate Chris's point, we do need to have a pathway to demonstrating that those discussions are happening and there's a timeline to getting those commitments in place prior to the project commencing. There's a question around for matching funding. Does the ERA accept venture capital and or private equity? And I'll just reiterate Chris's point that we are looking for a minimum of 1-to-1 matching funds, and that other matching fund coming from private entities, including private equity as well as venture capital. So that's a good question. Thank you for that. So that private funding, the 1-to-1 match, the need for that private funding is truly sort of a non-government, non-public funding would be the match. I think across ERA's portfolio, we're looking at a 5-fold increase in other funding compared to ERA funding across the entire portfolio that Justin talked about. There's a question around some sweet spots and specific targets for, let's say, GIG reductions, capital intensity. Is there a certain number of letters of support that meet the sweet spot? And I'd say that the answer is no. We don't need to have we don't have specific targets, but it is important to have letters of support, as many as you can. It's important to quantify the claims that you have around GHGs and benefits, whether they're economic benefits, other environmental benefits. To Chris's earlier point, there's technical review teams, and the technical review teams like to see, quantification of the claims that are being made. We're also seeing a few questions coming in at specific opportunities. Chris, do you want to just address how the specific opportunities can be addressed?
Yes. So just as a reminder, any specific questions you have about your project, so is this particular technology eligible? Is this type of project? Is this location? All those things. It's often better to just address those one-on-one because the details do matter. So when we conclude our Q&A in just a couple of minutes here, we'll have a slide up with those email contacts, and you can also find them everywhere in all the materials. So if you reach out to us through whatever one of those contact points, we'll get it triaged to the right person who can answer your question. Another question here is around, so how do we assess TRL? Is that a component level? Is it at the system level? If individual components of a technology have been validated at high TRL, but they're being brought together in a new configuration, is that eligible? Absolutely. And so when I say our novelty requirements are relatively flexible, that's a great example where if you can convince us that, hey, yes, I'm bringing together proven components, but this is a novel application, a novel combination of those to achieve a particular result, that's a really good example of you're actually doing two things. One, you're showing us, yes, there's an advancement here. We do need to prove that this whole combined system works. But at the same time, you're actually reducing the risk of the individual components not working. And that's also something we like. So could be to your benefit. Last question, and again, please reach out if your question hasn't been answered yet. I see a bunch of questions here around if a project is already in flight, if equipment has already been purchased, if costs have already been incurred, is the project eligible? The short answer is yes, and in fact, it's often projects that are in flight that we're able to fund just because of the tight timelines of the process. With that said, we'll only match go forward expenses from the timeline of the full project proposal submission. So what that might mean is that your total project budget, a portion of it might be ineligible for matching, but that your whole project could still be eligible to receive funding. So just again, come talk to us about the timelines. The presence of ineligible expenses or pre-incurred expenses doesn't disqualify you, but it might just limit the total funding that you can access. And so we're happy to chat. With that, that's the end of our Q&A period today. I think we made great use of the time. So thank you very much, Iftikhar, for triaging those questions and facilitating that Q&A. Again, as next steps, we do encourage you to review the guidelines and the supporting materials on the website. It's very much to your benefit to give those a close read. You'll see the most important email there is on the slide, applications@eralberta.ca. I assure you that inbox is monitored by real people. In fact, it's monitored by the exact people that you need to talk to get answers to your questions. So Iftikhar and his team. And so if you submit an email there, we will respond to it as quickly as we can. I will tell you, we get a very high volume of such emails right after these webinars. And so please give us a couple of days to respond, but we do respond to everybody in the order that you've submitted your question. Lastly, we do hope to have the webinar posted on our website, both the slides and the Q&A recording. So my voice, Iftikhar's voice, Justin's voice, will be posted on the website by the end of this week. So if you want to review anything we've said, or if you had to miss a part of the webinar, you can access everything we talked about there. With that, thank you so much for joining us today. We really look forward to your submissions to this year's Industrial Transformation Challenge and to working with you on improving Alberta's competitiveness. So thanks for joining us.